I hear you.
All
There you
right,
go.
nice. Welcome everybody to the Boomer Talk podcast. My name is Jordan. You might know me as One Up Analytics. My co-host is Taylor, aka Somebody's Gun, and our guest this week is the man, the myth, the casting legend, Ballatw. Thank you for joining us this week.
No problem, guys. Thanks for having me.
So let's start it off here. The big thing going on this week is a bit of a feud between Fortnite and Apple, and kind of Google now as well. Um, for anybody who doesn't know what I'm talking about, last week, Fortnite or Epic Games decided to give mobile players an option to buy V-Bucks at a discounted price, kind of like through a back channel that's not through the App Store's in-app purchases, and that's against Apple's App Store terms of service, obviously. So Apple decided to take Fortnite off of the App Store. Google did the same thing with the Google Play Store. And I think the latest development with that is yesterday, Apple said that they would take Epic Games developer accounts away. So
Oh,
basically, a legal battle is ensuing here. A lot of stuff to talk about. Bala, do you have anything you want to start us out with?
Um, I mean, basically, we're just gonna have to wait and see where this kind of goes in a lot of different places. There's some considerations for me specifically, like competitively, what does that mean for mobile players and stuff like that in the coming months. But for the most part, it's like I'm not a legal expert, so I don't know too much about how fast this is gonna go or where this is gonna go and on what sides. But definitely something that we should all be kind of keeping an eye on. I think as much as possible.
Yeah, because the thing is, as of right now, I don't think that Epic's able to push any updates to the app right now, right? And that pretty
Think so.
much means that within, I don't know, a week's time, mobile players won't be able to play from their platforms.
iOS players. You
iOS
got to be
players.
pretty clear on that, right? Because Android, while it's not on the Play Store, there's still ways that you can play on Android.
Oh, gotcha.
Like the version I have on my phone is not through the Play Store at all.
Yeah. So,
Interesting.
so I mean, mobile obviously has a pretty big competitive scene. I don't know how that's going to be affected. There aren't many major tournaments coming up that I know of. Maybe other than the Cash Cups. Am I missing
There's
something?
no, there's like a couple smaller mobile community tournaments because I've been cast in those. And then we also have DreamHack. So we can't discount mobile players that are playing in DreamHack. Both, I believe, Will Guo and Unreal qualified for finals out on NA West. So those are two players we could be missing out on come these DreamHack events. And I mean, the season's supposed to start, like the new season's supposed to start next Thursday, I believe. So
And
who
that
knows
fast? Let's
how that
go.
is going to, like, I don't know, like what does Epic do if they can't release their new season on iOS? And if the Play Store is not available to update the game, you know, not everyone wants to go through uh, the hardest, I wouldn't even say the hardest, but an extra step to download a game, right? So if it's not as easy as possible, then players just simply aren't really going to care. And generally, if we look at it, like, does that mean console now starts to come back as a dominant force in the console and mobile tournaments? Are they going to give as much money to simply just console if mobile can't even be updated for the seasons? So that, like, there's a lot of questions that have come from this, and it doesn't, like Bola said, none of us are legal experts and we can't answer these questions, but there's a lot being posed by these lawsuits and potential outcomes that could be coming here. I mean, likely not soon with the way these things go.
My question for you guys is, who do you think is in the right and the wrong here? And maybe it's like a little bit more nuanced than that. Maybe it's not black and white, but
Yeah.
I'd like to get your guys' thoughts on that.
Yeah, I definitely think probably a little more nuanced than one side is right and one side is wrong. But in general, I think I agree with Epic's philosophy about open marketplaces and you know, trying to create competition with them in the marketplaces. But some things that they've done with their marketplace, the Epic Game Store, doesn't freaking like show that or show that philosophy or prove that that philosophy is what they're actually going for. But some things that they've done is good in that regard too. So I don't know. I generally think I agree with Tim Sweeney's philosophies about what the development ecosystem should be and everything in that regard. But at the same time, it's like, well, Apple Store is Apple Store, and there really isn't any legislation or anything like that that covers these areas. So I'm not super educated on any of those sides, and I'm not super educated on any sort of legislation that, you know, fits in these criteria. But I think that we do need to push some of these things forward and really start to get answers for. It's similar to like what the whole DMCA situation is on Twitch right now. Like, there's a lot of gray areas which I don't think the law covers at all, and the DMCA specifically definitely doesn't actually fit where we're at right now. And I kind of feel like this is probably in one of those situations where monopolies about software aren't very super clear, especially when it's like proprietary software on a specific operating system. You know, it's like super weird and finicky in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts on it are that you're right. Like, there's a lot of gray area in this space, and it seems that the decision that comes from like this specific situation could have like pretty big ramifications just for tech in general, and especially for Apple in general. But I don't know. I'm curious. Like, do you think that is going to get to that? If Apple's really like kind of putting a lot of pressure on Epic right now, basically saying that a big chunk of their player base is gonna not be able to play their game in the coming weeks. Do you think that Epic's gonna go through with this, or do you think it's gonna kind of fizzle away?
100%. I think this was all calculated. There's a reason that this has come at this moment in time, right? Epic had to know that there was going to be consequences for their actions. They clearly had a plan for when these consequences took place, and now they have to deal with their actions, right? Like, I don't think regardless of how quickly this suit goes, Apple or Epic are just going to step back and be like, oh, all right, yeah, this is not what I meant to do, because they've both taken a stance at this point. And, you know, Epic seems to mean well, right? They seem to be doing this for other developers, and that's what their claims are. But at the end of the day, you got to think it's more about their revenues, how they make money, and throwing these kinds of narratives along with the lawsuits that they're coming are only going to help them, right? Because both Apple and Google have been under investigation by Congress recently. There's been hearings where Apple executives and Google executives have been in front of our legislature discussing, you know, similar issues. I don't know exactly what that is. I'm not 100% sure, but these things are top of mind for people making these laws. So Apple's kind of just feeding into the fire, or not Apple, Epic is feeding into the fire that the legislative branch has to put back at Apple and Google when they finally do make a decision.
I think in regards to like whether or not like they're going to continue going forward with this is 100% like I agree with you, Taylor, that this is obviously planned. They obviously knew. They probably sat down with Apple many times and said, hey, 30% on the store is way too much. Like, you reduce it. And they're like, no. And then Epic is like, okay, well, we're just going to direct pay or whatever. And then Apple's like, well, we're going to take you off the store. And Epic's like, okay, well, let's chill for a bit. And then they do it eventually, right? That's how these kinds of things go. But like, in terms of them being off of the store, number one, I actually don't think they're probably losing that crazy amounts when it comes to Fortnite revenue. I think they're probably going to be losing a lot more now that this whole development ecosystem part where they're losing access to update Unreal Engine on iOS will probably cost them more in regards to reputation with developers and just being involved in this whole thing overall. But I mean, Epic stands to gain a lot more from this lawsuit than they're losing in the short term for not having Fortnite on the iOS store, right? Like they're gonna get the rate reduced significantly if this is successful, and they're also gonna get their own store or whatever it might be on iOS, which is unheard of, right? Like that to me is like the end goal and the end business move. It's like, yeah, they're gonna get their own store on iOS to break the monopoly, and now all of a sudden they're making money off of apps on Apple, right? So I think that's the end goal, and I don't think there's much to do with Fortnite at all, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's a good point. I didn't fully think about the fact that if they were to win this, they would pretty much be able to get their own store on iOS, like as would other developers. But yeah, that's a good point. Do you guys want to move on to the second topic?
Yeah, that works with me. I mean, just one
Absolutely.
little note here. I do believe like McDonald's and like Starbucks have circumvented that 30%. So there are apps on the App Store that currently are circumventing that 30% that
service
Epic
apps.
is. Yeah, there's no gaming apps within app stores, which is I think where the big controversy is over. But again, I'm not an expert, so let's move on to the next one.
All right, so this is right up Ball's alley. Let's talk
Yes,
about
sir.
solos as a competitive game mode. We just finished up FNCS solos. A lot of people have opinions on it. A lot of them negative. A lot of people don't think that it's a great mode for like the highest level of competitive. Bala just wrote a detailed blog post about this. I haven't personally gotten a chance to read it yet, but I will after this podcast. Sorry,
Come on, bro.
it just came out. It just came out.
I'm just kidding. It's gonna take you like 4 hours to read, so it's all good. Like I understand.
But yeah, why don't you start us out since you're the expert on this?
Yeah, sure. Basically, my opinion is that the focus of competitive Fortnite in general over all time has been way too heavily on solos. That's not to say it's a bad mode, and I don't actually agree with people who say solos is not competitive. But the other modes are certainly more competitive in my mind, and I think that there are too many issues with solos that will hurt us in the long run. That ranges from competitive integrity, that ranges from the idea of griefing, that ranges to not being able to provide or to propel large fandoms within the community and within the esport. There's a number of things that I really feel like solos does not do good at. But at the same time, it does well in other things, right? Like it's a really, really good entryway into competitive Fortnite. It's really easy to play. But for the main mode of competitive, for FNCSs, for World Cups, for all the major LANs, I think that team modes are the way to go. They're more exciting to me. They're more interesting. They have more intrigue. They're easier to understand at a high level. And there's also just more opportunity for cool things to do with team modes. So that's it in the gist. There's a lot of nuance to it that I don't think people really understand or get or care to understand. But yeah, that's basically it.
Before I go into Taylor, just to walk that back for a second, the first thing that you said was that solos is just like inherently not a very competitive game mode.
I didn't say that. That's not what I said.
All right, so help me understand what you said then.
I said that a lot of people. I said I disagree with the people that say that solos is inherently not competitive.
Okay.
Because to me that's wrong. Solos is competitive. I mean, we've seen it. We've seen many times how often the top players are placing well in solos and qualifying for the major solos grand finals and stuff like that. It's just that team modes are probably a little bit more consistent, probably a little bit more competitive than the solos. Okay. If you want to go on, if you want to talk about that aspect of what I said, which is about the competitiveness of the mode, I never said, and I will never say, that solos is uncompetitive.
Okay, so your main concern with it is more the not the broadcast aspect of it, but like the fandom aspect of it, and kind of how people consume it.
Yeah. I mean, that's one aspect, right? Fandom is certainly, in my mind, more difficult with solos, right? Like I get more attached to a team. I got more attached to TSM when we first started playing competitive Fortnite than I did to pretty much any of the trios or squads or any of the duos or solos or anything like that at all, right? It's just inherent to me that you get more attached to a team because a team has more than just one guy. So that's that fandom aspect. And when it comes to being a fan of a competitive Fortnite player or game, it's really difficult because if you're a fan of Mr. Savage, right, and maybe that's the only competitive Fortnite player you know, it's almost impossible to have fun watching competitive Fortnite because he's going to die off spawn, 4 out of 6 of the games, right? Or he's going to die before the end game of most of your games. There's not going to be doing anything for the majority of the game until the end. And that's really hard to understand as a fan. So you kind of need to pick like a broad range of people, and then all of a sudden you can try to make it, it can kind of start to be fun to watch then, but it's really hard to be attached to people because there's ebbs and flows all the time. Your top player's not always going to be winning. In fact, most of the time they're probably going to be losing, just straight up in solos.
All right. So
go ahead.
Yeah, this was a topic that we were going to discuss anyway. I'm not a fan of solos. Like I enjoy the larger team modes, trios and squads. I know most people probably moan if you say squads, but I think that had less to do with the actual game mode than the current state of the game when it was played. Now, I think my two biggest reasons why I would like to see solos take a step down and really be more of like Balla said, the entry, the kind of like you can make a name for yourself in solos, but at the end of the day, we're playing team modes, is because one, solos exacerbates all of the issues that are in the game. We're not playing a perfect game right now, and there's a lot of issues, but the game is still awesome. Like we all love this game to a certain extent, and the issues we could deal with. But solos, like when bugs happen, and Ballatw talks about this, it ends the game and it almost ruins tournaments at times. That then takes the narrative away from this person did amazing to this person's tournament got cucked because of a bug or something that arguably couldn't be in a game, right? Then the second piece is the depth and the strategy that goes into team modes is so much more advanced and intriguing to me than it is in solos. Like solos, it's yourself. There's not that team spirit, that camaraderie that comes together, as well as the depth you can go into in the game and the strategies that you can employ from a trio as to just playing in a solo, if we're talking about trios, because that's what Ballatw focused on mostly in his speech or blog post, I guess I should call it. So those are like inherently the two big things for me. Is I really enjoy the depth of this game. There's so much within Fortnite, and we don't get to see the game develop in solos as I feel like we would in trios, duos, squads, because you're not constantly being focused on what could go on as a whole team. It's really just in this meta, it's crash pad endgame. Like that's really all you have to do. And if we were playing trios, it's not going to be that simple. You have to communicate. You have to build a strategy to get through endgame, and you have to have a strategy going in, like you do in solos as well. But at the current state of this game and the meta, it's a lot easier to play as a solo than I believe it would be as a team mode. So that's kind of my quick rant about solos.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I definitely agree with the fact that team modes have a lot more strategy involved. Um, Obviously, like it's not just like solos is much more mechanically focused. In team based modes, you could kind of pick up the slack for bad mechanics by having really good teamwork, really good team strategy. There's a lot of
For some reason, people think that's a bad thing. By the way, and I don't understand that at all. But yeah, I just wanted to point that out real quick. Like people are like, "Oh, you can cover up bad teammates because you get carried or whatever." It's like, no, that's not actually like what's happening at all. To me, that just adds more dynamicism. But
yeah.
anyways,
To me, it was never like covering up bad teammates. More like people could have different strengths just in being like mechanically cracked. And
yep.
I always thought that was a really interesting aspect of team modes. Um, the one thing I'm curious about, I'd like to hear Bala's opinion on this. Um, I always kind of thought that solos was a bit easier to follow, just because you're following one player's journey from the beginning of the game to the end of the game. You don't have to worry about where are his teammates, what are his teammates doing at the same time, um, and I wonder if that's a difficult thing to cover as a caster, trying to like convey what multiple different players on a single team are doing all at the same time.
Um, I mean, when it comes down to like end game, it certainly is maybe a little bit more difficult. But early game or mid game, I think that's just all the more interesting, right? To me, I don't think it's anything particularly difficult. For me to watch that, it's like super simple, right? I'm just looking at the radar and whatever. For a beginning viewer, yeah, sure. Um, but at the same time, it's like those are things that we should be trying to solve. And I really don't think that they're that difficult to solve. I mean, you look at a game like Counter-Strike, you could look at a game like League, and the viewers get by just fine, right? Where it's almost even more complex what the teammates are doing at certain times um, than in Fortnite. In Fortnite, the goal is survive and get kills. It's like really simple to me to break that down, and what certain people are doing at certain places, it should be kind of interesting to try to digest, I guess. And if it's not, then it's boring. Uh, and I think that simpleness in solos is actually part of the issue, right? Especially like early game. Early game solos is boring as hell because you either kill the guy that's contested or you disengage and just go on your loop path. But there's a lot more nuance when it comes to team modes in that regard, and describing what the teammates are doing is interesting.
I would agree generally. Yeah, I mean the big thing that I think we're missing out on is the consistency of any kind of team mode. Like we haven't truly been able to see team modes develop. Like this is the first season where we've had some insight as to what the next team mode is and the ability to actually practice it before going into the major tournament, right?
Yep.
And I think for me I love that because now we're going to see trios develop throughout this season and it's not going to be constant snake season. Like they've had time to kind of figure out what goes on, build chemistry as a team, think about how the game is played as a trio, and we're going to see peak trio play next season. And that is so much cooler to me than solos can ever be because it just doesn't have that. I'm a big team guy. I grew up playing team sports and seeing that camaraderie, the ability to play as a team, the communication. I mean, we may not be able to see that during, the replays, but plenty of people stream this game. You can understand that and you can see the depth towards the game and see how teams are playing differently. In my opinion, this solo meta was very similar. Everyone almost played exactly the same, and I don't think you would get that within a trio or squad or even duo game mode.
Is there a particular game mode, and maybe Bala, you talked about this in your blog post. Is there a specific team mode that you think is kind of the best?
Yeah. To me, I've always liked the larger team modes. First off, like I'll clarify that I didn't really go into what I think is the best in the blog post. I'm more focused on the fact that we should have one mode that we focus on to have that consistency that somebody's gun is talking about. But the thing is, like, to me, I've always thought that the less entities in the game, the better. And so I've gone towards squads a lot. And I really, really, really freaking enjoyed the squad season that we had. To me, that was one of the most interesting storyline wise and meta wise and all that stuff. But I think from a community standpoint and from a viewer standpoint, I think trios is probably a little easier to digest. And I think that the community will be more open to going full out on trios, right? Whereas I think there's definitely some hesitation when it comes to squads. I don't agree with that hesitation, but I think sometimes you have to take what you can get. So to me, I think trios would be the best thing to push for, because it has a little bit more of that intrigue, a little bit that narrative shifts within teams and whatnot. It's not just following one relationship; it's following, three or whatever it might be, whatever permutation it is in trios. That is interesting, and then also it actually adds everything. We bring it down to 33 teams in a lobby rather than 100 freaking players, which is just so impossible to manage from a viewer's perspective.
Do you think that there ever would or should be a team mode that's bigger than squads?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that we can. I don't think that the game is in a place where fighting 5 different people is possible, because it's already crazy, right? With the 3-dimensional place that we're in, the ability to have, verticality on top of the horizontal factor and all 360 degrees. It's like it's almost impossible to track 4 people, but tracking 5 or 6 or 7 is a crazy prospect to me, and following that as a spectator is almost harder. Yeah. But I could see a world where there's like some cool, like if this was maybe back in the very first days of competitive Fortnite when we had squads as a mode and they were all trying to scrim and they were playing very tactically. Yes, I could probably see 5s or 6s working, but at this point, there's no way that could possibly work.
Taylor, what do you think?
I mean, not as a serious competitive mode. I would like to see a World Cup All-Star game with, representatives from each region playing like a Team Rumble style. I've pitched this before, so whatever World Cup happens, we need to make sure that happens. Other than that, I mean, squads, yes. I'm a fan of big team modes. I think the more you add, the more complex the game gets. And Dilix, 4ZR, No Word, and oh man, I can't remember the last one.
Keep going.
DRG, that's it. DRG, yes.
There you go. Yep.
Those guys, like, they had the squad meta down so well and were playing at such an amazing level in squads, and watching them navigate it without even hearing their comms. Like, they didn't speak English or really even stream that much, so I couldn't understand what was going on. But you could see the clear strategy and roles within their game. I love that. That brings me back to a time where Fortnite was awesome. Not that it's not now, but it's different.
I felt the same way about Behave, Chapik's crew and Ritz. Like just watching those guys navigate a game. There was actual Storm Surge thought. You had to have strats around Surge that wasn't just go base up in the center of zone and stuff like that. And just the way that they found impacts. There was a bunch of stuff, but in general, I did find that fighting in Season X versus fighting in Chapter 2, Season 1 was much easier to follow, and easier to actually work around. And there were some great moments. Like, thinking back, like, in Chapter 2, Season 1, I was, like, all aboard the squads train, but thinking back and now looking at both of them and trying to, like, analyze both, I remember 1vx clutches much more frequently in trios from Clarity G, from Stretch, from Zexro 1v6 and Retail Row. I saw some of that from like Commandment and some people in squads, which was super, super hype. But I think that basically the balance is you want clutch moments. I think that team modes give you that. I think that duos, it's too frequent. It's like it's too frequent and not as exciting to see somebody clutch. Trios, it's like, it's not as frequent and it's also freaking hype. Because it's literally 1v3 and not necessarily just 1v2. And then squads is just like completely too rare. So that's kind of a spot as well that I compare the modes in.
Ball, I know that you might need to hop off the call soon, so if you do, that's all right. But the last thing,
I got about 5 more minutes.
Okay. The last question I wanted to ask, based on this this topic, is we've seen a lot of people express how much they like off spawn fights because it kind of creates like a rivalry. It gives players an opportunity to strategize around their opponents at the beginning of the game. In solos, you could very well see that because people are splitting drop spots. But when you get to bigger team modes, you might not see that as much because like a squad takes a POI and that's their POI. There are enough POIs on the map for each squad to take their own little spot. Do you think that that's the downside of team-based modes? Do you think like there should be some sort of incentive?
I talk about that in the blog. I think that's good, right? I think that makes it more competitive. I think that makes it more interesting, and I think that provides some consistency. But I mean, some of these spawn fights that you can actually recall from squads are the most legendary of all time, right? Like Frenzy Farm, right? Defend the Farm. What else? There's freaking Sweaty Sands with the team that somebody's gun mentioned against Mitro's squad. Like, most legendary fight of all time. Whereas the duos fights were interesting, I think, in FNCS. They got a little too griefy for my taste. But they were still there. In solos, what can you remember? Snazy versus Thomas HD. It's like the only fight. Actually, I genuinely, like, that's like the only fight that was at all interesting. Why? Because in these off-spawn fights, it's like both just die, right? They just both die, and they're both just ruining each other's games, and you forget about it. Whereas something else, it's like a little bit more intense. You have room to disengage. You have room to do different things. You have room to switch drops entirely. Whereas solo is just like a clusterfuck of whether you're gonna, find gold in terms of a drop spot. But Mr. Savage fought Noah Riley in EU finals. That was boring as hell. Benji fought Kiriachi a couple times. Boring as hell. Thomas HD fought Snazy at the pontoon. That was hilarious because they were both 50-50ing and they had their freaking communities behind each other. That was it. Like, cool. Solos, really good job, early game rivalry. Like, amazing.
Well, it's more reliant on the RNG you get in the game than anything else. Like, if I get a shotgun and an AR right off the rip, I'm probably going to push someone, immediately off spawn in a solo. Whereas, like, I guess that's not necessarily the case, but it's reliant as to what you get out of a chest and what you get out of floor loot as to how that fight's going to go. The more people you add, the less likely it's going to turn into just a shambles fight with a pistol versus a hunting rifle, and that's not interesting. No one cares about that. Like, I don't care what your loot is off spawn to then go ahead and win a fight. And POIs can be fought. Like, in team modes, they can be fought. And you can dominate a team mode and then make someone leave. In solos,
in solos you start
you can
dominating
carve it
each
out.
other and then you split.
Yeah,
and then you split the POI next game. The same thing in duos. I mean, the infamous Mitro Mongol versus Zayt and Saf at Loot Lake, right? Everybody's like, oh, it's gonna be such a great fight, and then they never fought, right? Because it's pointless. Whereas in squads, you literally you either win the fight and they leave, or you don't and you both lose the game, or make it very interesting because you're not trying to completely ruin it for both sides. or there are sometimes those cases, which happen many times between Mitro and Alexa squads at Sweaty Sands during the weeks. But it was way more nuanced than a simple, all right, we won the fight, or I don't want to fight anymore. Let's split the drop. Like, I don't know. I don't think that drop splitting thing happens in larger team modes. I think it happens in solos. I think it happens in duos. But I think in trios, it's like done. You're either fighting or you're not. And there are examples of some split drops, but it's not like super unfair compared to everywhere else. It's just game theory, right? Like you think of the Fortilla right now, and it's like everybody knows who's landing there, and they're like, okay, that's Dubs. I don't want to shoot at Dubs, but all these other guys who are landing Fortilla, I'm gonna shoot at them, right? And that's not even malicious. You're not doing that on purpose. It's just something that goes in your head, and all of a sudden it's unfair to Thomas X24 at Fortilla because he doesn't have name recognition or he hasn't, proved his rep or whatever. But all of a sudden he's getting teamed on by accident or not even like on purpose. It's like a whole weird situation in solos that doesn't happen in team modes.
Yep. Misty Heat 4 in NA East doesn't happen in team modes, which,
Yep.
there's that's a whole nother topic we could dive into, but that's something that I think Fortnite needs to communicate about clearly if we're going to continue to have solos as a consistent team mode.
Yes.
But we won't hold you for too long, Ball. I want to say thank you for joining us, man. We really enjoyed having you.
No problem, guys. It's been fun.
That.
Appreciate you guys inviting me to discuss a little. It's definitely been fun. So, hey, keep it up, guys.
Right, thanks.
Will do. Have a good night, man.
All right, peace.
I got to change the scene here, everybody. We're going to continue the podcast, go through the third topic, and then we'll take some audience questions as well, some chat questions.
All right. So while Jordan's getting this ready, I'll go ahead and introduce our second topic here. And basically what it comes down to is third. Yep. That's why you're the math guy. Basically what it comes down to is the dismissal and conversation over the success of newer players and even players in smaller regions. So like we see this happen all the time, right? Like, oh, dude, they're an OC. Those guys are terrible. Or this guy is a controller player. Like he's dog shit. He only won because he's on controller. Or, he had a broken drop spot. So he was the best one, right? Like these things are absolutely ridiculous to me. And the conversations that are had in some of these, I guess it's mostly on social media. Like they trigger me because it's not advancing the success of the game and the success of new people, which is inherently going to happen in a game like Fortnite. And it kind of shows the true character of some of these people that are doing it. I know you wanted to talk about this, so go ahead. What do you got, Mr. Jordan?
Yeah, and this actually kind of piggybacks off our last topic because a lot of the discrediting that was happening after this past FNCS was done like kind of in the name of solos not being that competitive of a mode. And so it's just like another thing that people hide behind. And obviously, like we just had a whole discussion about whether solos is actually that competitive. But I don't know. It's just another thing that people like to hide behind and blame on for their own poor performance and a way for people to drag down players who performed well. And obviously, I don't know that. Obviously, that sucks. I'm not sure if like moving to a T mode is going to change that. Like we've seen in the past, people drag down players who performed well in like squads because they said that they got carried by their teammates. So I don't know. It really comes down to like just the maturity of the community, which we all know is not that great.
Oh boy.
But yeah, no, it pisses me off too, just because like I don't know, man. Just like let people have their moment. Let people enjoy the fact that they won. Like they played well. Like that's I don't know. That's the game that you decided to get into, and that they won. I don't know.
Yeah, and so I think one of the things I think of is that Creo tweet where he's like, "Tell me this game mode's competitive," and it was talking about solos in the FNCS Grand Finals, and he put a picture of the leaderboard as evidence of this game mode not being competitive. Like, no, these players worked hard to get where they are, and it's not because it's solos or because it's whatever it may be as to why they're doing well, right? Like, Fortnite is not a game where you can just randomly start placing well. It doesn't happen. There's way too much that goes into this game. Like, maybe you get one high placement and then start consistently doing well, but it's not like I could just become, a top 5 FNCS and then have no other placements ever. That's just not how this game works. It's too complex. It takes too much time to develop your skills in. I kind of got sidetracked here, but essentially we need to embrace the successes of people in this community and help build them up, as opposed to try and cut them out from underneath before they have successes or when they have successes, right? Because that's not a community you want to be a part of. If every time someone succeeds who isn't in your Discord is now gonna be outcast or shit on because they didn't know him ahead of time.
Yeah. So, I don't know, man. Like somebody in chat just said, like you could randomly start placing well through soft aim, and like I don't know. I don't want to pick on you, but I don't like when people just make baseless accusations about top performers using hacks. I think it's a really, really bad state of the game, like bad state of the competitive community when it gets to that, because we're tearing people down and we have no idea, whether they're using hacks and cheats or not, and that just takes away from like enjoying the success of other people. I don't know.
Yeah.
We said this in the last podcast as well, but like imagine if in baseball every time someone won Rookie of the Year, we said that guy's probably using steroids. There's no way he had an actually good season as a rookie. He's never done well in the MLB before. No, that would be terrible.
It's a ridiculous claim. And to repeat last week, like another thing. So we brought up Creo, we'll bring up his teammate Bucky. So when the whole Archive 8 situation was happening, he tweeted out that, the best thing that could happen to this guy was being accused of cheating because that's how he got a ton of clout. Like, tell me how that is good in any way besides his social media growing. But the only reason his social media growing was because everyone thought he was a cheater, and they're all probably accusing him of being a cheater. So all he did was gain more people who accused him of cheating. So I don't understand how things like that, even like, how do they come into people's heads? How do you think that is a good thing, man? I don't know. Maybe I was raised differently, but I just can't ever seem to find a way to make sense of that.
I love how animated you get about this topic.
Bro, it pisses me off. Like that, there's not much that really bothers me, but trying to put the success of other people on cheats, and then when you're proven wrong, still trying to say that, oh, this was a good thing by lying about someone and defaming them and ruining their character. Like, no, that's not a good thing.
Yeah, so somebody in chat said sometime has to be the first time. It's a great point. Everybody had a first time that they placed well. And if it's today, if it's 2 months from now, that doesn't mean, it doesn't like take away from it. just because it happened later than it happened for other people.
And I remember at the beginning of this, like when people started popping up during the World Cup and you started seeing these names for the first time that play well, you're like, oh, dude, who is this guy? Like, I got to go figure this out and find out, what he's about, who he is. And, maybe they didn't have a face to them at that point. But that was so cool. Those were celebrated. New people and their successes were celebrated at that time. And I feel like it's not the same anymore.
All right. Do you have any finishing thoughts on this topic? If anybody has questions you want to ask, doesn't matter about what, throw them in chat. We'll answer some. Sorry, Taylor. Do you have anything you wanted to wrap up that topic with?
No. I mean, just do better. That's all I could ask for, man, is just do better. Like, we could sit here and complain about this stuff, but at the end of the day, it's up to the people that have big platforms and up to the people who follow all those people with big platforms to give them those platforms in order to become quote unquote role models in the community. Maybe it's time to look elsewhere for role models, and maybe competitive players aren't necessarily the best role models for people. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that's like a tough thing to do though, right? Because if we're talking about the competitive community, not like Fortnite as a whole, if we're talking about just the competitive community, the people who are generally just the most respected, who just are kind of the de facto role models, are the people who perform the best. And like, we don't have any say over whether that's, I don't know, a 25-year-old boomer who is like mature and could, lead people well, or like a younger player who doesn't they don't have as much life experience, we'll say.
No, but it doesn't have to be simply like an older person. Like, look at Booga. Like, there's no better example of a younger person who's been a solid role model, right? At least for the most part. We all make mistakes, but he's been a solid voice within the community since he won World Cup. Like, he's not a total ass when he comes on stream and stuff like that. So I do have hope.
Yeah. No, I definitely didn't mean like, in order to be a good role model, you have to be like 20 years old and older or anything like that. It just tends to be that people carry themselves more maturely when they get older. Well, that's obviously not like a hard and fast rule.
Facts. All right, let's answer some questions. You want me to field the questions?
Sure.
Let's go. All right. First one up from Rice Hoob. I feel like a large amount of fights in squads resulted in a quad spray and less interesting method to fights. Do you feel this would make it less interesting for the viewing audience?
I think like, I don't know. They're just like different fights, right? Like you're not necessarily gonna be able to showcase all your mechanics in a team fight, because there's just a lot more going on. You can't always isolate one player to take a 1v1 with and just out skill him or like out mechanic him. And obviously, like if that's what you look for when you're watching competitive Fortnite, then you're gonna be like a little bit disappointed when you were watching team modes. That's just the truth. But like, I don't know. I think like there's something to be said for team fights and the strategy behind it. And I don't think it's like as simple as just like turning into quad sprays. I think that like there's more strategy behind them. And if you could appreciate that, then I think team-based modes are really fun to watch. What do you think, Taylor?
I think that was well said. And I think in the last team modes, we didn't have as good of production as we do now. like just thinking this season from last season, disregarding the state of server replays, the production has improved immensely. So being able to show those like third-party POVs or using the drone free to get that over-the-top kind of view in fights during these large team fights, not necessarily 100% going to be focused on fights from a single person's gameplay perspective. I think that is going to be so cool and allow people to actually understand what's going on, as opposed to simply just watching, a single person's gameplay with everything else going on around them that you truly can't take in. So, moving on. This question is from Resub again. What do you feel about some of the criticism of the main broadcast from pros such as Bizzle?
I'm not familiar with this.
I don't know. Let me pull up the Bizzle tweet. Yeah, I'm not sure either. I think the broadcast did the best they freaking could. Like, I don't know. Obviously, the state of the game isn't perfect. But, what he tweeted out, and I'm assuming what Reese is talking about, why would anyone watch the Fortnite stream when it's 5 minutes behind everyone streaming it? And he tweeted out, how can you cast a frozen screen?
Was there a frozen screen? Oh, you mean like when the server lags or whatever?
Yeah, it's when, you can't necessarily see anything going on.
More than 5 minute delay. Yeah, I mean that's obviously not the caster's fault at all. That comes down to like the spectator tools that Fortnite and Epic Games provides them. Yeah, like I'm not gonna fully disagree with that. I think obviously Epic needs to work on that. Something they need to improve. Especially when you have individual players streaming it live, like as things are happening, to have a broadcast that's running that far behind, it's very easy for things to get spoiled. Like people that you're watching with or people tweeting about it are going to be a few minutes ahead. So it's kind of like I don't know, like 10, 15 years ago when there was no like if you wanted to watch a sports game but like you couldn't watch it at the time that it was live, so you record it and you watch it 3 hours later when you get back home. And so like for those 3 hours you can't go, I mean there wasn't really much social media, but like you couldn't like get alerts on your phone, you couldn't like talk to anybody or like look at a TV screen because you didn't want anybody to tell you what the score was. It's kind of like that. Like you can't really go on Twitter much. You can't like interact with people on social media, which is an issue, right? Because you want people to be interacting and I don't know, talking about FNCS when it's happening, right? But if the broadcast is 5 minutes behind and other people are watching like individual player streams, as someone that's watching the main broadcast, you can't really go on Twitter, right? So yeah, like I fully think that's an issue. Maybe the solution is that players are not allowed to stream. Obviously, like there are downsides to that as well, but yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with that being like a pretty big problem.
So I'm on the opposite end. Like I don't care if it's 5 minutes behind. That's the only thing I'm watching. Why does that matter? Like they could easily fix this by enforcing a delay, and this is so much different than traditional sports. Everyone, if this was in real time, you can go pull up the Fortnite broadcast and get so much information that would help you as a player in game, right? And you can't do that. Like you simply can't provide real-time information to players when they're playing at home, and we already have an issue of competitive integrity. So maybe the simple fix is you have to have X minutes delay on whatever your stream is if you're going to stream the event, right? And players are taking that risk anyway. They know if they're streaming, you're going to have issues with stream snipers or people watching, whatever. The problem to me is the state of server replays. I give so much credit. I tweeted this out. So much credit to the production team and the casters that put everything together this weekend for FNCS, because that could not be easy. Like sometimes it's 15 seconds of desync and you have no idea what happened. And like what comes to my mind is Aussie and Monster did such a great job during these times. Maybe it's because I wasn't able to watch EU before that. But like they just come to mind as being able to get through that without really, stumbling or falling into issues. And, maybe every once in a while it's like, crap, this happens. And the production team did do a good job of then using those moments to take like a step back and kind of give like an overview of the lobby, as opposed to just sitting there watching someone, run off their builds or run into a wall, right? That does need to be improved upon, and I'm sure they're freaking working on it, right? Anything else before we move on to the next question?
I think we covered that pretty well.
Nice. GG's. All right. This one is from D1DL. Do you think Fortnite should have more competitive esports like CSGO with coaches and stuff? I don't really know about anything. I don't know what stuff means. I don't. Maybe franchises is what he's talking about for stuff. But as far as like coaches, we discussed this last podcast. If you want to.
True. Yeah. I feel like you just didn't want to answer that question at all.
What? No, I threw it to you. Yes, I think there should be more coaches and like other entities simply than just players within an organization. But right now, Fortnite is not a known entity as far as investors and sponsors and teams go. So they don't know if they want to invest in all this other stuff. So yes, there should be all that stuff. In a perfect world, there is all that stuff. But we're still developing the competitive Fortnite scene. That's my answer, Mr. Jordan.
Yeah, we definitely talked about this more at length last week. So if anybody wants to watch that, just check my Twitch VODs, the podcast with Levin and Reese Hub. But like I think like the main gist of it is just that orgs don't really have as big of a role in Fortnite, in competitive Fortnite, as they do in other esports. And so it just becomes a lot tougher to have like these big like structures built around players, right? Like, is it economically feasible or financially feasible for an org to hire a coach full time, to hire an analyst full time, all these different things. So like, yeah, 100% it would be awesome to have these things, but the way that competitive Fortnite is structured definitely makes it difficult for that to happen. And obviously, like there are pros, there are advantages to the way that Fortnite is structured, but that is definitely like a downside of it.
And we can leave it at that. Next question. Do you think in comp they should make it when you drop from the battle bus, you get a gray pistol, 100 mats to make it less RNG?
Oh, am I going first?
I guess, unless you want me to.
I mean, I think like, I don't know. That's just like, that changes the game so much.
So what was it? The John Wick mode where you spawned with a tactical AR and a shotgun. I think that was actually a pretty good idea, but I think we've gone way too far away from that. Like that was last year. Like that was a long ass time ago that was first introduced into the game. It was when the combat shotgun was in the game, so it might even be over a year ago. I think we've just gotten too far into Fortnite to change the basics of it, really, because that would be a huge change to the way Fortnite's played.
Yeah. If it were to ever happen, like it wouldn't happen for a really long time. It'd have to go through, um, experiments in like pub matches and arena and before it made its way into like actual competitive. Um, I don't know. I really can't say there just has never been anything like it in Fortnite, so we don't know how it would change the way players behave, right?
All right, next question. I believe this is basically just your thoughts about collusion between players in comp. I'll start us off here. It is miserable and disgusting, the fact that this continues to happen. And I do agree, like, at a point, it's not beneficial to someone to fight people off spawn. But having those people in your call, discussing what goes on off spawn, and all of that nonsense that comes with it is absolutely ridiculous. I think Balla put a good point, and you should go read his blog post about it. But solos only exacerbates this issue. You know, if you're in a team mode, how would it help you at all to go ahead and have somebody else in a call having to listen to their comms and like then also communicate to your teammate? Like it's just not really that feasible unless it's pre-planned. But that stuff kind of that plays into a whole different effect. I really wish they would make statements about this and have a harder stance about communicating with players that are in your lobby but not on your team. Because okay, cool, like that's fine. You know, you want to hop in someone's call, but when it comes down to it, you can't tell me you're not going to act differently if Jordan and I are in a call talking to one another and I know he lands at X spot, I land at Y, and I know our paths are going to cross if we get certain zones. And like, you can't tell me that I'm not going to act differently or he's not going to act differently based on that information.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, there just needs to be like not even just more specific rules against it. Like there just needs to be some sort of mechanism to ensure that this isn't happening. Like you can't really rely on players to just not do what they're not supposed to do. If people think that they get an advantage from cheating and they think they're going to get away with it, a lot of people are going to do that. There needs to be some way to like ensure that this is not going to happen. Not just like, okay, be more specific about what's illegal and what's legal, right? I'm pretty sure players know that they shouldn't be doing certain things that they're doing, but they're still doing it. So yeah, I don't know. That's on Epic to make sure that doesn't happen and put mechanisms in place to ensure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, because like if it became more enforced, it would essentially stop people from streaming events or dissuade them from streaming events, because the only people that would get caught with that are people that are streaming events, right? Because you wouldn't know if I was in a call with Jordan if I wasn't streaming the event. So how would you be able to enforce that? I think that's probably the bigger issue is you don't know, they don't know how to fix it. But at the same time, just putting a statement out against doing these kind of things hurt. Does it help? Probably. Does it hurt? I don't see how it could make it any worse.
Sure. We have one more we could answer before we wrap it up.
Yeah, Reese said, how do you feel about the tactical AR would fit back into the meta?
Tech AR honestly was like a little overpowered in my opinion. I don't know how you feel about this. It's like you could use it as kind of an SMG and an AR at the same time. It has like great accuracy, so you know none of the downsides of the SMG. I mean, it would be interesting. It would just definitely be more powerful than the AR currently is, and the SMG currently is. I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure I don't really think that it would change much. Because I think people would still prefer the AR for like the range uh piece of it. Like you can't really get storm surge tags with a tactical AR. Maybe it would increase the number of people that are picking up sniper rifles, which is not a good thing. Um, yeah, I mean, who said this? This is totally off topic, but I saw someone say that basically the reason people pick up snipers and hunting rifles are because there's not enough good things in the game currently, or easily accessible things to actually have a good loadout. So they're kind of just forced to pick up sniper rifles. And think about it. Like if you could
I don't
have
know
two
if I agree with
heals,
that, man. I don't know if I agree with that. I gotta be honest with you.
right? Okay, maybe I don't know, but like if I could have two heals, an AR, shotgun, and either crash pads or peppers, why am I picking up a sniper rifle?
Yeah, no, like there are definitely enough items in the game. Like
Yeah,
if
but
you have a
those clog
chart,
it up.
if you've
Those clog it up, so you can't get the good items. You just get freaking snipers, and because you can't actually get those good items, you're forced to take the sniper rifle.
oh wait, the tweet was that people are forced to take the sniper
Yes.
because they don't get the other
They
items.
can't. Yeah, they can't actually get the items that they want in the game.
I mean, okay, I didn't understand it at first what you were saying.
And then
I mean, I guess,
that
but like,
only increases the number of people that have snipers, and then snipers are shit. So
I don't agree with that last part. I don't agree that, like, how does that make sense, right? If a sniper is in the game, then you'll sometimes get snipers instead of what you might want instead, right? You might want a crash pad instead. So sometimes you're gonna get a sniper instead, and you're gonna have to take it. But like, how does that make people take snipers more? Do you know what I mean?
no, that's exactly the point.
No,
There
like
would be less people taking snipe. Like,
there would be less
yeah,
people taking
whatever.
snipers if snipers were not in the game at all, right?
Yes,
So like, but like, I don't see how there could be less people taking snipers if snipers are still in the game. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
I don't know. Yeah, I give up.
Do you know what I mean though?
Yeah, no, I phrased that badly. And I don't. My thoughts weren't
But no,
formed
like
before I started
I
talking.
agree that like snipers probably clog up the loot pool. Like maybe they just need to be less, like have lower drop rates or something, or maybe like the hunting rifle needs to be taken out and there's just the bolt, or maybe there's just the heavy sniper or something like that. There definitely are too many snipers in the game. I agree with that point.
Yeah, I mean, like I think a good fix, you could just reduce the spawn rate to 0, and less people would take them.
Wait, what? What do you? Shut up!
Take them out of the game.
I don't even know what you're talking about anymore.
Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to follow One Up Analytics on Twitter, YouTube, and all social medias because he does some awesome stuff. If you haven't seen his Arkham player profile, make sure to check that out because it is the most advanced analytics you will find in the Fortnite community. He won't give himself that kind of praise, but I will. So thank you for watching. My name is Somebody's Gun. I appreciate you guys. You can find me on social media and stuff too. One Up, you got anything else to say before we wrap it up?
Yep. Yeah. Thank you for the kind words. Obviously, follow Taylor as Somebody's Gun on his socials. He's got great content as well. Check out Ballatw's blog post. Thank you, Ballatw, for being on the podcast today. Follow right now on Twitch if you're still watching, so that next week you could come back and watch the podcast again. We have another excellent guest on next week. Yeah, I think that's it. Thanks for tuning in.